Good day, everyone. I made this video discussion because I believe some of you are having their face-to-face face-to-face classes for their laboratory courses, no? And I think that although not all, but some will be having hard time to find place in school na merong malakas yung internet to attend our live or synchronous classes, no? So I decide na lang to make this video discussion. Okay? As I've said, we will be discussing partial differentiation today. Okay, let's start right away. Now, yung partial differentiation class, for example, we have here a z function, no, that is being expressed by x and y. That is a function of two independent variables, x and y. So, for example, meron tayong function here na z is equivalent to 3xy plus 4y squared plus 5x squared. So, as you can observe, meron tayong function z na both are expressed by these two variables. So, xy, y squared, x squared. So, yan yung tinatawag nating yun yung tawag nating function or equation that is expressed by two independent variables. Say, for example, x and y. Now, if we will be, if we will held y as a constant, then our function z becomes temporarily a function of the single variable x. So, meron tayong, if that y is constant, no, meron tayong z function that is a function of x. So, pwede natin makukuha yung partial differentiation ng z function with respect to x, or that is the same thing as this one, no? Partial derivation or derivative of our function with respect to x. So, meron din another symbol representation for that. Ito, another symbol to, guys. And then meron din ito. Okay? Pag meron tayong f sub x dito, that means we are partially deriving the function function f of xy with respect to x. Or simply, ganito na lang, f of x. So, these are just some of the synonymous terms, kumbaga. Synonymous terms for the partial derivative of partial derivative of z with respect to x. Okay? So, if we will be putting that in statement, no? That is partial derivative, no? Of function z, no? With respect to x. Ay, ganyan yan. With respect to x. Okay, because we are holding, okay, y as a constant. Now, the same thing with x. Now, if we will held x as a constant, then z becomes temporarily a function of the single variable y. So, ano naman yung mga symbols nito? Ito, partial derivative of z with respect to y, or df with respect to y, no? We have zy or f sub y and function of x and y. Then also this one, f of sub y or f sub y. So, these are just synonymous terms, okay? Now, if z is a function of x and y, then the partial derivative of z with respect to x is symbolically defined as this one. Okay? So, to be uniform, no, we will be using this one or yung u sub z, ay, ang pasabot, okay, ng u sub z, u sub y, okay, or u sub x. So, they are being partially derived, no, with respect to these subscripts. So, we have with respect to z, with respect to y, with respect to x. So, often we will also be using that one. So, if we will partially derive, no, the z with respect to x, that is expressed as or defined as the limits, no, of our function, no, as delta x approaches to 0. So, we have already discussed this one, the limits of a function. So, that is, as the limit approaches to approximately 0, then that is the first derivative of that given function. Now, and the partial derivative of z with respect to y is defined naman this one. Okay, we have partial derivative of z with respect to y. Same thing pa rin to, wherein yung limits natin as delta y will be approaching to 0. Okay? I think that's the definition lang ng partial differentiation. Basically, we are holding one variable, either x and y, to be a constant, then we will derive the function z with respect to the another variable. Okay? So, ganyan lang yan. So, let us illustrate some examples. Okay, for example, this one. If z is equivalent to x squared y, okay, plus 4x plus 3y, find the first derivative, or meaning to say the partial derivative of our function z with respect to x, meaning to say we will held y a constant, no? y is a constant. Then for this one, we will partially derive z with respect to y, meaning to say x is a constant. Okay, so let's start with dz over dx, or the partial derivative of our function z with respect to x. So again, partial derivative of z with respect to x. So mangyari niyan, we will treat this one as a constant. So etong 3y, that is a constant already. No? Tama ba? So ito, magiging 0 na yung derivative na yan. So meaning to say, if we will treat this as a constant, so ito lang i-derive natin. So that is 2x, no? Okay? Then y. Plus, ito, derivative ng x, okay? Or derivative ng 4x, that is basically 4. Ito, that is treated as constant na, kaya 0 na yan. Kaya yung partial derivative ng function z with respect to x will be equal to 2xy plus 4. So that is your partial derivative of z function with respect to x. Now, ano naman yung partial derivative ng z function with respect to y? Okay, again, dito, for this case, we will be treating x as a constant. No, meaning to say, ito magiging constant na yan. Ito magiging constant na din to. Okay, tama ba? So, meaning to say, if we will treat this a constant, we will copy that one. Then, the derivative of y is simply 1. So, kaya we have 1 here. And then, ito, that is the derivative of a constant, 0 na yan. Plus, derivative ng 3y, since we are deriving this with respect to y, that is equivalent to 3 times 1. Okay? Therefore, your partial derivative of your function z with respect to y is equivalent lang sa 2x plus 3. So, basically, this is your answer, no? So, that is just simple, no? Yung mga, basta, isipin nyo lang, class, that if you have here, with respect to x, with respect to y, the other variable is treated as a constant. Okay? Let's illustrate another example. If z function is equivalent to x sine y plus y sine x, find the partial derivative of our function z with respect to x, no? And partial derivative of our function z with respect to y. So let's start with partial derivative of z function with respect to x. So basically, we will be treating y as a constant. So ito magiging constant na yan, ito magiging constant na yan. So if we have here sine y, that is a constant, so we can just set that aside, no? Sine y. Then derivative ng x would be equal to 1. Plus, okay, itong sine x, that is a constant, so we can just, I don't know, y is a constant, so that is y. So, ano yung derivative ng sine x? Okay, that's correct. The derivative of sine x is cosine x. So, therefore, we have dz over, partial derivative of function z with respect to x is equivalent to sine y plus y cosine x. So, basically, this is your answer for the partial derivative of our function z with respect to x. Now, for our next problem, okay, ito, partial derivative naman ng z function with respect to y. So, ano yung, we will be treating x for this case, no, as a constant. So, itong x, that is a constant na. So, therefore, we can set aside the constant x, and then derivative ng sine y, that is cosine y, no, plus, okay, itong sine x, that is a constant already. So, we can just set that aside. So, sine x, then the derivative ng y will be equal to 1. So, therefore, yung partial derivative ng function z with respect to y is equivalent lang sa x cosine y plus sine x. So, basically, this is your answer for this partial derivative of function z with respect to y. So, for the third example, so, ito yun u, no? U. Mean to say, instead of z, we are, tawag nito, we can use the u function if we have, instead of, like for example, kanina, di ba, z is a function of x and y. So, pag u na, meaning to say, we have a function, we have a function of x, y, and z. So, as you can observe, meron tayong x squared, meron tayong y, meron tayong z. So, tatlong variable na, or tatlong independent variables na ang magre-represent sa atin ng u function. Okay, therefore, find ux or u sub x, meaning to say, we will be deriving the function u with respect to x. Yan yung ibig sabihin nito. Then this one is partial deriving the u function with respect to y. And ito naman, partial deriving the u function with respect to z. Okay? Kapag tatlong variables na or independent variable. Okay, let's start with u sub x, or that is the partial derivative of u with respect to x. So, we will be treating, no, y and z is a constant because we are partially deriving the u function with respect to x. So, ito lang yung madiderive natin. That is 2x. So, ito, that will be 0. Ito naman, since meron tayong x dito, then z is a constant, so derivative ng x is equivalent to 1. So therefore, yung partial derivative ng wave function with respect to x, or that is u sub x, no? That is equivalent lang sa 2x plus z. So this is your answer for this first unknown. Okay, for the next unknown, so we have here partial derivative of u with respect to y. Okay, we will be treating x naman and z as a constant. So ito, that is automatically 0 kasi x yan, plus yung z squared, that is a constant, and derivative ng y with respect to y, of course, 1. Plus, ito, xz, as you can see, walang y dyan, so kaya that is automatic equal to 0. So we will be simplifying this one. Diba, the partial derivative of u with respect to y, that is the same with u sub y, or that is equivalent lang sa z squared. Okay, that is our answer. Now, for our last unknown, that is the partial derivative of u with respect to z naman, or that is basically, we will be treating x and y a constant. So, ito, x squared yan, so automatic that is 0. Plus, meron tayong z dito, so we will set aside y. Then, derivative ng z squared is 2z. Okay? Plus, meron din tayong z dyan, then we can just set aside our constant x. Then, the derivative of z with respect to z, that is 1. Okay, therefore, the partial derivative of u with respect to z, or that is u sub z, is equivalent lang sa 2 2yz plus x. So basically, this is our answer for our third unknown. Okay, I hope you understood the topic about partial differentiation. If you have questions, do not hesitate to ask. So I will just be uploading this, what do you call this one? I will just be uploading this video in your BBL, and then I will make it as a discussion, no, so that you can comment down there your questions if you have questions, clarifications if you have clarifications. So as for your assignment, no, this will be submitted, no. I will give you ample time for this, so this will be submitted tomorrow, 11:59 p.m. So you have one day not to do this one. So in the comfort of your own homes, or kung saan man kayo ngayon. Okay, so that would be on April 24. Right, tomorrow? Is it 24? Today is 22, 2021, 22, 23 pala. Okay, that's 23, 2026. So, I hope you understood the lesson. And on our face-to-face classes, we'll be discussing partial differentiation pa rin of higher order na naman. So, we have here partial deriving the z function with respect to y, second derivative niyan, ayan, and so on and so forth. Okay? So, I hope you understood the lesson, no? And see you around. Thank you everyone for listening. Bye-bye.